Hello, viewers. This is Dr. Kamar Chima, and today, from the platform of the Sanober Institute, newly established think tank in Islamabad, we are going to have a conversation how Pakistan-Afghanistan relations are going to be different in coming years. And I'm glad to have with me Ambassador Azaz Chaudhry, who is former Foreign Secretary of Pakistan, and he's also the chairman of the Sanober Institute. Meanwhile, I also have with me Mr. Abdul Basit. He's a research fellow in Singapore, and we will shortly be joined by a journalist, Ans Malek, who heads the Pakistan Bureau Chief Vion News. Thank you very much, Ambassador Azaz Ahmed Chaudhry, and thank you very much. Mr. Abdul Basit, for your time for this wonderful conversation at the Sanober Institute.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. So, to let you know that the Sanober Institute basically is a non-partisan platform for an informed dialogue on geopolitics, geoeconomics, governance, and environment, the issues that affect the present and the future of the people of Pakistan and South Asia. The values of this particular think tank are originality, comprehensiveness, relevance, impartiality, and modern. Mr. Azaz Ahmed Chaudhry has been the main power and force behind the opening of this think tank. Thank you very much, sir. But I just want to give you the floor so that you can talk on this particular topic, that how Pakistan-Afghanistan relations are going to be different in coming years, particularly since the Afghan Taliban took over on 15th August 2021. We have seen a lot of highs and lows, ups and downs between Pakistan-Afghanistan relations. What's your take on that, sir?
Thank you very much, Kamar Jima Saab. It's a pleasure to speak from the platform of Sanober Institute, which hopes to be an independent voice on issues that matter to Pakistan. This particular issue weighs heavily on our foreign policy agenda. Afghanistan is a Western neighbor, but the one with which we have deep cultural, linguistic roots. And I believe this relationship has not been steady or as we would have wanted it to be. Perhaps on both sides there have been grievances right from the beginning, and it all started even before Pakistan was born. If you recall, Afghanistan, the then government of King Zahir Shah sent a delegation to British government that these territories up to Indus River should be included with them now that the boundaries are being redrawn. And British did not agree. A referendum was held. Ever since, there has been a problem, and then they raised the issue of Pashtunistan. Did not vote for Pakistan in the UN General Assembly, and this Pashtunistan issue kept on lingering and affecting the relationship till we saw 1979. When the Soviets came into Afghanistan, the whole thing changed. Pakistan, US, and Saudi Arabia sort of teamed up. And from there on, it has never been a steady ride. Especially in the last 20 years, Pakistan saw the entry into Afghanistan of another actor, which is Al Qaeda and ISIS. That changed the equation even more. And then we saw that there was a fallout between America and Pakistan because they felt that perhaps Pakistan was not helping them enough in defeating the Taliban. Whereas our view was that we will persuade them, we will cajole them, but we cannot take them on in a kinetic fight on the soil of Pakistan. Otherwise, that fight will, Afghan war, will shift to Pakistan. Nevertheless, the Americans opened a dialogue with the Taliban, and they got some commitments. When the Taliban came into power again, second time, in August 2021, there was an expectation in Pakistan. Expectation was that Taliban being quite quite familiar with Pakistan. They have had families here. They have had medical treatment here. Would be more friendly. But unfortunately, the Taliban, while espousing friendliness, started helping TTP. They released their prisoners, and the TTP started attacking Pakistan. That has spoiled the relationship. We now see that there are issues on the borders, there are issues with the trade, and lately the return of refugees is making headlines. All this makes a very complex web. How do we make future different from this unsteady past? I believe that Afghanistan needs to be engaged. Whoever rules Kabul, that has been our policy. We should engage them even without recognition, because recognition issue is a regional issue, and there is a Moscow platform and other regional platforms in which that issue can be decided, following the you know affirmation of certain commitments that Taliban had given. Now we need to engage them at every level. We need to talk to them at every level, and there are many leverages that Pakistan still has. I don't think there should be any tit for tats. I think there should be leverages that should be used. Trade and transit trade is one. Regional economic projects is another, and there are many others. But I'll pause here because there are other friends who would like to chip in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Azaz Chaur Sahab, and we also welcome Mr. Ans Malik, who heads the WION News in Islamabad. Thank you very much for your time for the Sanober Institute. Now, I will give the floor to Mr. Abdul Basit. Mr. Abdul Basit is a research fellow at in Singapore, and would love to have his perspective that how he sees this developing Pakistan-Afghanistan relations. The floor is yours, Mr. Abdul Basit.
Thank you, Kamar. First of all, congratulations to you, Mr. Azaz Choudhury, for starting your institute. I wish Sanober Institute all the best, and I hope in the coming months and years it will emerge as one of the leading think tanks articulating policy and academic discourse on various geopolitical and geoeconomic issues in Pakistan, and become voice of reason and logic to drive the policy discourse. Now, coming to your question, I think right now, if you look at it, so the ties between Pakistan and Afghanistan, or between Taliban and Pakistan, have nosedive for issues that are known to everyone. Uh, our policy has been of whatever we expected from the Taliban has been based on assumptions, right? We expected them to, control TTP. We expected them to recognize the border. We hope that Indian influence in Afghanistan will be wiped out because we'll have a friendly regime in Kabul when the Taliban will return to power. And then our wish list goes on. The only problem in this equation is none of this is in writing. There is no agreement. The Taliban are not treaty bound to oblige us on any of the data points that I mentioned or the policy issues. But we supported them, and we thought that the camaraderie will be reciprocated. Now, in the policy domain, wishes and aspirations have no place. There are interests, and there are friends and enemies, and you pursue your interest based on realpolitik. And I think this is where our policy discourse heavily lacked. And the other side of this is we overlooked very complex questions, such as the Taliban's relationship with TTP. If history is any guide, and if we had read history correctly, we should have known that Mullah Umar, the founder of the Taliban movement, he gave up his government, but he defied the US pressure and did not hand over Osama bin Laden, the mastermind of 9/11 attacks, to the US. So if he did not give up OBL to the US, how were we assuming that Taliban will disown TTP, with which they have historical, ideological, ethnic, geographical, and battlefield linkages and camaraderies? The TTP owes, its oath of allegiance to the Taliban's supreme commander, Haibatullah Akhundzada. In a way, TTP is an ideological extension of the Taliban in Pakistan. While Imara Islamia, or the so-called Islamic Emirate, which has been established in Afghanistan, they want to see a mirror image of that in Pakistan. They don't say that, but if you read the ideological discourse, that's pretty clear. And what Mr. Azaz Chaudhary alluded to, that they claim the territories up to Attock as part of Afghanistan, and they see the border as a colonial imposition. Now, you look at TTP's discourse and TTP's stance on these issues, the irredentist claim, it's the same. Now, what we are seeing for the first time, the issue of Pashtunistan has traditionally been dominated by secular forces. For the first time, we are seeing that these jihadist groups have started owning the Pashtunistan issue, the separatist, claims. And you see, if you read TTP's literature, in one of their magazines, which is Mujalla Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, they even offer, negotiations to Manzoor Pashtun, the secular movement of PTM, to sit down and discuss the issues because their demands and agendas are similar. So look at the level of pragmatism and the space in which TTP has maneuvered itself. Now, TTP, for whatever the worth the group is, offers a lot of leverage to the Taliban over Pakistan. So I think we assumed a lot based on goodwill, based on reciprocity, but the way things have unfolded, I think in 2 years, the relationship has broken down. And the policy that we have adopted now will even erode whatever little good diplomatic goodwill is left for Pakistan in Kabul. We are, squeezing that space even. And ironically, while the world is now moving towards some form of engagement with the Taliban, you look at the US policy discourse emanating after the July meeting. If you look at the July meeting of the Taliban and the US in Doha, in Doha, Qatar, you'll see that the communique that was issued from both sides heavily overlaps. You'll see that for the first time, the US has dropped its policy of preconditions towards the Taliban. So the US had primarily three preconditions: progress on human rights, particularly girls and women's right to work and education, counter-terrorism, and inclusive political governance. These were the three conditions, that the US attached for engaging with the Taliban. They have dropped that. And the previous communiques after meetings between the US and Taliban officials read like, press releases from two different meetings. But the July communique, more or less, the tones from both sides were similar, which means that a psychological barrier was crossed where the US has now moved from isolation to engagement with the Taliban. And there have been several trial balloons. If you look at how the US commentariat has reflected on this issue on the US media and think tank circuit, Foreign Affairs ran a survey asking 50 Afghan and US experts of Afghanistan that what should be the US policy. There were essays written in Foreign Affairs, in Foreign Policy. There were webinars, seminars in the Middle East Institute in the US. And there are several other examples of this as well, which in a way is clearing the way for greater engagement. Now, as the US has moved towards that, we are moving towards the policy of boycotting and isolating the Taliban. So I think our policy discourse needs to be based on a realistic, evidence-based assessment of the ground realities and what our options are, rather than basing our policies on hopes, on wishes, on aspirations or on anger. Our previous policy was based on hope. Our current policy is based on anger. It was counterproductive then, and it is even more counterproductive now. I'll stop here and we'll continue the debate. Thank you very much, Kamar.
Thank you. So I'll go to Mr. Ans Malik. Ans, thank you very much for joining, and that's the same question for you. That how Pakistan-Afghanistan relations are going to be different in coming years. Mr. Azaz Chaudhry and Abdul Basit have given their opening remarks, and I would love to have your opening remarks on this, please.
Right. Thank you so much, Kamar, for having me here.
And let me tell before you speak that Mr. Ans Malik has covered. He has been to Afghanistan many times. He has been on there, and he has a first-hand knowledge of Afghanistan. He has met many leaders in the Afghan Taliban and has been there. So that's why we really wanted to have your say and your.
Thank you so much, Kamar. Good to see you, Ambassador Zasab, after a long while. I started as a rookie reporter, so it's always privileged to be with you on the same panel as you. And congratulations, Kamar. Just to add, I mean, what Azaz Saab and Abdul Basit Saab has said, I think that pretty much sums up the discourse on how relations between Pakistan and Afghanistan are or have been. But I mean, I would just want to contradict how Basit Saab had pointed out the stark difference in two communiques. It's not just the mental barrier. I've been covering Afghanistan extensively up until last year, until I was abducted by the Taliban and then subsequently released. That's a different story for a separate day. But I think the Taliban's policy towards Pakistan had been clear since day one. They're excellent negotiators. They're very clear. They're very clear-headed in what they want, and that is something that the policymakers on the Pakistani side, both the civilian and the military policies negotiators, they knew. Not just Pakistan side, but to elsewhere as well. Even the U.S. Policy negotiators. I remember on the 5th of September 2018, when Zalmay Khalilzad first came to Islamabad with Mike Pompeo. I was outside and we covered that meeting quite extensively. And since then, we saw this round of engagement that has been happening. But then let's not forget that there was a break in talks between the Afghan Taliban and the US in 2019 April that led to the spring offensive being announced. And then eventually Zalmay Khalilzad had to fly down back to Islamabad. And then we saw those negotiations resuming after that meeting in Bourbon. So you've seen this back and forth. What has changed, I think, after the fall of Kabul is our expectation spectrum. We were not realistic. When I say we, is the Pakistani state. And when I say the state, I'm not pinning the blame specifically on the civilian side or on the military side. A state is basically a collusion of both the minds from both the sides, from the civilian side and from the military infrastructure. I think that it was not realistic on their part. I was outside when I was at the Serena when General Faiz came in, the then DGISI. Then I was in Host on the 25th of October 2021 when the first meeting between TTP and the Pakistani negotiators took place. Since then, there had been a round of meetings that led to the eventual ceasefire that was agreed upon in the months to come. I think what we have to understand is the practicality of the issue. Afghanistan or Taliban are not a ragtag militia anymore. They're not a force per se. They're a government, and they would want to be dealt as a government. And I think that is where the policy makers on this side of the border, they're mistaken. It is easier to say that you consider it as an independent sovereign state, but at the same time, the thought of them being really an independent sovereign state, that has not really been there, and that has been bothering the Taliban. I think hate is a very strong word, but they certainly do dislike you since day one. And I mean, you would see when the reports of Panjshir being fallen on the 6th of September 2021, and then subsequently the announcement of the cabinet that happened on the 7th of September 2021. Before that, we saw those extensive fake news in a section of the media that said that Pakistan was arming and aiding the Taliban. The Taliban did not deny that. Of course, that was all false and fake news, because a day before Panjshir fell, I was literally there on the 5th September. This is Sunday, and 2 days before that, General Faiz was there. So over the course of time, what we have to understand is that this sense of deprivation, or this bridge that we have, that is there, it's not there just in one day. Pakistan has used iron fist. Pakistan has used the carrot and stick approach, and the Taliban have seemingly not been able to get over it. For instance, I'll quote you another example. When in 2019 the negotiations broke down, what did Pakistan do? They arrested Qari Yusuf, who was the then shadow governor for Helmand, and that eventually his family was also arrested. Eventually, Zabiullah Mujahid then issued a statement without naming Pakistan, saying that he was arrested by authorities in Peshawar, and that such pressure tactics would not work on the Emirat. Eventually, he was released. The negotiations went on. We can debate on the contours of the agreement that has been there, because I strongly believe that it was a surrender agreement and it was not an agreement to bring peace, though having extensively covered that both in Islamabad, Kabul, and in Doha, and traveled with them to Abu Dhabi, to Oslo, to other power centers where they had been trying to negotiate. So lots there. But just I think, on coming back to the question, why now? How Pakistan? Why is Pakistan reacting now to what it is, and has it not been there? I think the incident of Chitral, what happened in Chitral on the 6th of September this year, was a breaking point. And that was it for the government. That was it for the policymakers. They knew that the threshold the threshold has collapsed, and now it is time for action. So it's not whatever that Pakistani government is doing vis-a-vis the refugees, vis-a-vis the crackdown. They are not refugees; they're illegal aliens. Vis-a-vis the crackdown, it is definitely in vengeance, and that's pretty much it. I think it was a bit naive on their part to believe since day one that in getting the Taliban back in Kabul would have some sort of a positive impact on the trajectory of Pakistan-Afghanistan relations. Stomach?
Thank you very much, Mr. Ans Malik, for giving a deep briefing of what has happened and how events unfolded. Going back to Ambassador Azaz Ahmed Chaudhry, I will be asking a few questions from all of you. Mr. Ambassador Azaz Chaudhry, you have covered the foreign policy for your entire life, and you have been a practitioner, in fact, with India, China, Pakistan, Iran, Afghanistan. You have been all these places. And as Mr. Ans Malik was talking about, that General Faiz went there the day Taliban took over Kabul. How do you see that as a practitioner of diplomacy? Was Pakistan, why Pakistan was so much in hurry? Why Pakistan couldn't negotiate with the Afghan Taliban the way the Americans did in Qatar? And how do you see? Just a few days ago, I was listening to the leader of the House in Senate, Mr. Isaac Dar, that the policy failure and of Pakistan. So, how do you see all that? And do you believe that since we are talking about that, how the relations are going to be different? Do you believe that, as Ans was mentioning, they dislike us? Do you believe that it's going to be another hostile country on our neighbor in coming years and decades, sir?
Thank you. I find a lot of merit in what Anas and Mr. Basit have said. I do have a few comments on what they have said. Mr. Basit says that Pakistan is now perhaps trying to boycott and isolate Taliban government. That's not my impression. My impression is that the return of illegal refugees is a signal that they are sending to the Taliban that after all these years of cooperation, if you don't address our core concern being counterterrorism, then all bets are off. I think it's a signal. This is my sense. I don't think it will And it is basically to let the Taliban know that we need to talk more seriously on the TTP issue. The second point that Mr. Anas made, that the Taliban are clear-headed about what they want. Of course, they are. But my sense is that Pakistan is also quite clear-headed, that we want a peaceful Western border. That has been our desire for ever since we had this troubled relationship with India, our eastern neighbor. Unfortunately, whatever we did, it didn't work with Afghanistan, because the rulers in Kabul have always tried to follow the term enemy of my enemy, neighbor of my neighbor is my best friend. So we saw that happen during the pre-Soviet invasion days, and even after that, that India was given a lot of space. And even today's Taliban are also trying to do that, although it hasn't really matured, but they have given that kind of signals. Pakistan has also wanted the Pashtunistan issue to be buried, but that got buried on its own after the Soviets came in. But now we see that irredentist claims are coming back in, creeping in the form of TTP. So that's another big, I would say, irritant in our relationship. We need to take that seriously. And that's why I say that engagement, I agree with Mr. Basu that engagement is the only way forward. My sense is that engagement is happening. I think people are taking it very seriously now, that we need to talk to them. And I have had some conversations with people who are doing those talking. I think they are talking on all these subjects in a very candid manner. My sense is that that they are trying to incorporate level. If the Taliban were clear-headed, they should also be mindful of the future of their country, and that can be best done if the common agenda is looked into. Now, what is that common agenda? My sense is the common agenda is that trade is in the interest of both peoples. My sense is that all these regional projects will benefit both countries. There is a lot under these two rubrics by which both countries can benefit. It can't go on that you have transit trade, but but the smuggling hurts Pakistan indefinitely, and that won't happen. I think Pakistan has gotten serious on this. Earlier, we looked the other side because we thought Afghanistan is a friendly country, but now that Afghanistan is not behaving as a friendly country, even from the people that we thought would behave as friendly country, naturally time has come to call spade a spade, and therefore Pakistan is reacting on smuggling options. Pakistan is reacting on refugees, but these are still signals. Smuggling is not a signal. Smuggling is serious, and but refugees return because these are illegal refugees. Mind you, nobody can question in the world on the legality of what we are doing, because these people should have been registered with UNHCR with us. So that's my take. I think Pakistan is seriously engaged in all these conversations on these very difficult subjects.
Mr. Basit, I have a question for you. Since you were talking that Pakistan's policy from hope to anger, you were also saying that that the Afghan Taliban they chose Al Qaeda or Osama bin Laden over the rest of the international community. So I think they are on a rational choice, maybe that they chose TTP over Pakistan. So uh, I have a question from you that do the Taliban think that they are now a state? They run a state. They are no more a militia. They are no more a non-state actor. They run a state. They have in few places they have their ambassadors. Although Afghanistan has not been recognized, so this one question that they are a state, they are no more non-state actor. One thing. Secondly, what they have really learned from the Qatar process, in case they don't want to understand the legitimate interests of the governments or the states who have been asking them that do not meddle or the Afghan territory should not be used against other countries. So what do you say on this, please?
There is a lot in that space. You have asked very broad questions. Look, I don't speak for them, so I do not know how do they feel. Maybe Anas has interacted, so he frequently visits. Maybe he can articulate better. But look, what's the historical fact? Look at the last 40 years. No ruler in Afghanistan has ruled Afghanistan over 4 to 5 years. Look at the communist, one after the other government kept falling, right? The Mujahideen government, there was a civil war. Taliban came to power 96, toppled 2001. Two regimes of Ashraf Ghani, two regimes of Hamid Karzai, max 10 years, right? So you look at the span of a ruler's, rule in Afghanistan, it's very short. It's very short. So that's a historical fact. But at the same time, there is no formidable challenger to the Taliban right now. There are no efforts afoot or in the offing which will try to destabilize them. I think there is this realization is on all sides. Taliban have cemented their grip on power. They are here to stay. They are a reality. And I think they should, and America is engaging with them, as I said, so they should take a lot of heart from that, that they are here to stay, and that should give them that security. They have they started behaving like a state in some instances, yes, in others, no. But I think it will take time. It's too early. We'll have to give them that time to be fair. Did we, interact with them like a state to start with? No. If they were a government, if they are a government, if they are, representative of state, we should have engaged them and dealt with them through state structures. We talk to a group directly through the mediation of the Haqqanis, rather than engaging the Taliban in a state-to-state framework, which we did later on, that we are not going to talk to, a non-state actor like TTP. This group is based on Afghan soil, using Afghan soil to undermine Pakistani security, and under the Doha obligation, it is the duty of the Taliban to take action against them. That should have been our policy right from the get-go. What did we do? We bypassed those structures, and some individuals talked to them in their capacity, and then came to the parliament seeking legitimacy of what they did, as a result of which some TTP elements came back, and everybody knows that what has happened, how counterproductive that has proven to be, right? And we are still suffering from that ill-guided decision making, which was at a very sub-state level, for a want of a better word. And then we sought legitimacy of that from the parliament, and then we took an 180 U-turn on that. So I think the problem is with our inconsistent approach to how we address very, very complex problem. As Anas said, what we know are half truths, half information at times, and we assume a lot. So I think what we need to do is, one of the answers to your question, Kamar, is engage in some serious research. Try to deconstruct the Taliban's ideological worldview and the mindset. To your question, it's $1 billion question for me. How do they feel? And then as a result of how do they feel, how do they react to different situations? So what I can tell you is anecdotes. What I can inform you is based on my secondary information, some speculative analysis. But where is evidence and primary analysis on that? So I think it is our neighbor. We need to understand that group. And I think this is where the think tanks like Sanober Institute should invest their efforts to better inform the policymakers of what the worldview is and how, it's a better way to tackle them. We are where we are, it is what it is. And how do we go forward from this situation? For me, that's the better question. Have they learned anything? The other question that you asked, I'm trying to remember some set of questions you asked me. Have they learned anything from Doha process? I think what they have learned from Doha process is negotiate hard. Negotiate hard, don't show any leniency, and stick to your grounds, because you are a reality in Afghanistan. People will come and talk to you, and I think that is what they have learned. As Anna said, they are very smart negotiators and they are very hard negotiators. There are two views in the Taliban. One believes that it is Mullah brother who won the war for them in Afghanistan through diplomacy. The other view is no, it was won on the battlefield and the Haqqanis won it. Whatever the merits and demerits of that debate are, I think the one lesson they learned from the Doha process is negotiate hard and don't give an inch. And I think so they stick to their maximalist position. And then what we now are doing is hard diplomacy with them. Whether they climb down from their rhetoric and act like a state or not, I think it's too early to judge them. It will take them some time to realize. One argument is there. I mean, I have studied these groups. So in literature, one argument is there that it is one thing to oppose the system, through an armed struggle, but it is quite another and very difficult to run a system. So now they are from opposing a system, they now find themselves in a situation where they have to run a system which is much more difficult. And the structural constraint and limitations of governance, foreign policy, difficult questions like the one they are facing right now, these set of factors can have a moderating impact on a group. They have to be more pragmatic. And let's assume they will be more pragmatic, but that's just an assumption. The literature says that it can have a moderating impact. So I think I'll stop there. I couldn't give any convincing answers to a set of questions that you asked, Kamar, but I think that's where we are right now. And the only thing I will keep emphasizing, whatever our new Afghan policy is, please make that policy with a consensus. Number two, be consistent in your approach. Whatever your approach is, you can't take U-turns on your policy in 6 months. From talking to totally, saying there will be no talks. Why there were talks and why those talks were led by certain individuals and the ownership of the system was not there. So I think we have to be consistent. Make your policy with consensus. We are in a political transition. Let the new government come in. All these decisions should be taken by the parliament. The public buy-in should be there in the policy. Only then, as a state and society, we will speak with one voice. As long as we speak with different voices, our policy will gather nowhere. Sorry, I've taken a lot of time. I'll stop here.
No, thank you very much for this wonderful answer. I will go to Ans for a question. And that question is about the India factor in Afghanistan. Particularly if you, I think Mr. Bassett is having a book of Dr. Hassan Abbas in his back, if I'm not wrong, Taliban. In this book, he basically mentions that the General Bajwa, the former Chief of Army Staff of Pakistan, really wanted that the Afghan Taliban to engage with India. How do you see this approach that came from the former Chief of Army Staff? And secondly, how do you see the Indian role in Afghanistan right now when recently we heard, I think, the Defense Minister Mullah Yaqub said that, I think, to the Indian media that they will get their soldiers trained in India. So in all these circumstances and discussions and challenges which we have spoken here in this conversation, how problematic it is going to be for Pakistan in case the India-Afghan relations gets good as General Bajwa really wants them.
I mean, I'll first. Can I slightly budge in and answer what you asked?
Yes, please,
first.
Please.
I think yes, the Taliban do treat them as a state, and that has been there since day one. Their approach to be treated as a state has been there since day one. The reason their emphasis on getting their own diplomats stationed at the helm of affairs in Islamabad, in Ankara, in Beijing, in Tehran, in Tashkent. That is the reason. That is the reason their emphasis has been that they are in charge of the operations that are there. Pakistan had been dealing it as a state-to-state basis. Yes, individuals do matter, but it was the state's policy. The state's policy was very inconsistent. One day you were talking about resettling the TTP. You were talking about giving them stipend. You were talking about giving them arms or their area of their own. The other day, they are terrorists. So that policy is basically no policy. It's basically you wake up one day and you're like, oh, this is done, so let's just draft something around it. That is where the problem has been, and that is where the problem will remain even going forward. And that is what the Taliban also understand. I said it before, I said it again, I'll say it again. They are tough negotiators, and one thing with the Taliban is you tell them you want this, they'll make sure you don't want that. You don't get it. That is absolutely clear-headed with the Taliban. I mean, that has been the case in the Doha talks. I can give you dates, I can give you instances, and for when you're talking about TTP, I mean, General Fairs came on the 3rd of September. That was Friday. 4th of September, I remember we were heading out. So I was still in Kabul. I was one of the few journalists worldwide to have covered to have witnessed the fall of Kabul itself. I was there for 117 days straight away, 3 weeks before the fall, 3 months after the fall. And when General Fairs came in on the 3rd of September, that was a Friday, so we had dinner that night with Mullah brother, Mutlaq al-Qahtani, who was a special envoy. And there was one more guy who, I forgot his name, was part of the Doha team from the Taliban. Then on Saturday, he went out to Intercon to have a formal meeting in Kabul. That same very day, while General Faiz was leaving the Serena, you know what happened? There happened to have the FC convoy was attacked just in the outskirts of Quetta. 40 people were injured. 14 people lost their lives. The FC convoy was struck by the TTP. That was claimed responsibility. This is the 4th of September, Saturday morning. I remember that very well. 5th was a Sunday when General Faiz headed back, when we headed for Panjshir. 6th is when Panjshir fell, and 7th onwards was a Tuesday when the Taliban had announced their cabinet. So the sequence of events is when you're trying to negotiate with no clarity of policy and no clear-headedness on what you really want, then this is what is bound to happen. I agree to what Basit has said. Their ideological relationship, it's not just ideological. They're historical, they're ideological, and it's more to do with that family orientedness, because they have these marriages now between the TTP or the Al Qaeda and the Afghan Taliban. So it's not like one fine morning you wake up and you're like, get out. It's just not virtually possible. It's just not possible, and I totally agree to what Basit said. Having said that, coming to your question, I think the India bit is really interesting because Taliban are a reality. They are stronger than ever. When the last time they came into power, they had 21 out of the 32, 33 provinces, 34 provinces under their control. The north was very much in resistance. Right now, they have everything in their control, even to parts of Panjshir Valley, right? To the parts of the northern resistance. Yes, there is a battle that is there, but on the face of it, prima facie, they are in charge of the entire country. So they're stronger than ever. They would want to have that semblance, and they would want to be treated in the same hospitable and respectable manner. Coming to the India bit, I think what you have to understand is that state bit of being treated with is essential to this part of to this part of the question, because the Taliban treat India as another state, as a state that is investing money. What does Pakistan have to offer, except for we've hosted them, so on and so forth? But that's a part of history now. For them, they don't look back at it right now. They don't care. What they care is about their development. Pakistan has the Jinnah Hospital, the biggest public-private partnership hospital in entire Afghanistan, the 200-bedded hospital. After that is the Nangarhar Institute for the Kidney Center, and then the Jalalabad Medical Institute. Three big projects that Pakistan has. If you go back and if you look at that, what does India have? It has a Salma Dam. They renovated. They made the Parliament building. They made the Rajiv Gandhi Institute of Children's Health. This is the second biggest institute or hospital for children to be treated. The first is the FMIC, the French institute, the hospital, and then the second is the Rajiv Gandhi Institute. Now, the Indira Gandhi Institute. Correct, pardon me on that. So, what I'm trying to tell you is that you might see our eastern neighbor as a hindrance, but they don't see it that way. They see it to their interest, and their interest aligns in terms of the development of the country. And if that development comes from your enemy or considerable enemy, they don't care. If they're putting in money, that is what is the bottom line for the Afghan side. So it doesn't matter. It was a joke actually that at this point of time when the Afghan Taliban came into power, that even if Israel would be investing through shell companies $10 billion, and they threaten one fine day to pull out or accept Israel, the Afghan Taliban would be forced to accept Israel because they're putting in money, and money is what really does matter and what does really end up pulling the strings at the end of the day. Kamar?
Hmm. So thank you very much. I'm just trying to conclude the discussion now. Azaz Chaur Sahab, just last question, round of questions from all of you, and that's on particularly basically refugees. How do you see this? Since Basit has been talking that Pakistan has an inconsistent policy for Afghanistan, and we don't have we shouldn't have inconsistent policy. Uh, there are many people who believe. I think you also mentioned that if the Afghan Taliban they don't listen Pakistan, obviously whatever the options Pakistan would have, they would try to utilize it. How do you see? Do you believe that this Afghan refugees policy, those who are illegal, this will be consistent and it will change the behavior of the Afghan Taliban towards Pakistan? How do you see this, sir?
Well, I agree with Basit that policy should be consensus based, and it should be consistent to the extent possible. Consistency is not always a given in any relationship, but yes, I agree, consensus based, and I think that's the last sentence of my article that is to be published in Dawn tomorrow. I think the best place for that is Parliament of the country, and whenever we took the matter to Parliament, I always saw that diversity of views enriched the debate, and we finally got an outcome which was good. My sense is that the illegal aliens or refugees, if you want to call them, this policy will continue only up to a point. There is no pull factor in Afghanistan to keep them settled there. So even when many times people went back, they came back after a few months because there was nothing to hold them there. There are no economic factors involved. My sense is that the Taliban, if they are really smart and if they want to really behave as a state, which I don't think they are. I think they are just playing with the trappings of sovereignty, but they are not behaving as a state. If they were to behave as a state, they would realize how much beneficial will it be for them to engage with Pakistan more meaningfully. Uh, they came to power in Kabul by force, and they think that by force, using the TTP proxy, they can get Pakistan to come to terms. I think that will be a mistaken belief and a sacrifice of a much bigger agenda which they require for their state. Let me just identify 5 or 6 of them. First of all, if the Taliban think that they will be the only ruler in Afghanistan for a long time, no. There will be resistance movements, and very soon they will start seeing those resistance movements coming in. Second, economy. They can't run on donations, etc. They will have to engage with China, with others to come and make investments, and also with Pakistan. Third, they would also need to factor in the human rights, the world's concern. This is now a unanimous concern all around that women cannot be treated the way they are treating women. I think they will have to come around to talking to the world and showing that it matters. And most of all, they just cannot treat terrorism as an instrument of policy. This has failed everywhere in the world. It will fail here too. They must now realize that if today it is TTP and Pakistan, tomorrow it is ETIM and China, and then IMU and Uzbekistan. Tajikistan is up to here. So they just can't behave as a state if they don't attend to all these areas. They'll be much better off if they have a meaningful engagement with Pakistan rather than pinpricks and terrorist activities. Thank you.
Thank you. So the last question from you, Basit, maybe since you have a very deep understanding of the entire subject, what options does Pakistan has in case the Afghan Taliban do want to keep TTP as a partner and they don't listen to Pakistan? What options, other options, or what will Pakistan do in that case, Basit?
I think I sincerely believe, and this is my candid and considered opinion, that instead of going on a unilateral trajectory that we have adopted in a knee-jerk manner, we all have talked about it. I think Pakistan should have continued building regional pressure on the Taliban. All regional states, Tajikistan, China, Russia, Iran, they have serious terrorism concerns emanating from Afghanistan. So we should have, raised these issues on these regional platforms. So bilaterally as well as on several multilateral forums, we should have continued raising this issue rather than if Taliban weren't listening to us, we should have, amplified that voice through these regional platforms and, build more pressure on the Taliban. I mean, China started two minilaterals. One track was Tehran, Pakistan, Kabul. The other was where Beijing talked to Pakistan and Afghanistan. So these mechanisms were in place. We should have engaged them through these mechanisms if they weren't talking on at bilateral level. And I think China, Afghanistan has a bigger concern vis-a-vis China in a sense that economically they are heavily dependent on them. So I think my first, submission is that we should continue to build with like-minded countries and voices which have add to the voices which still have concerns vis-a-vis terrorism in Afghanistan. Raise the voice at the international forums as well. That's one. The other is, I think, at the cost of repeating myself, our own counter-terrorism inconsistencies. The operational environment here has now changed. For better or worse, we are where we are, and we are dealing with a very different environment where we saw that Taliban's takeover had a rejuvenating impact ideologically, operationally, organizationally on Taliban. And terrorism in Pakistan has surged by 73% in 2 years. So we need to understand this new environment, right? We need to understand this new reality. We have to understand the new agenda. We have to understand how the networks are operating now. So about 40 factions since July 2020 have merged into TTP. Why these mergers are taking place? So while TTP is headquartered in Afghanistan, the bulk of the fighting force is still in Pakistan. So why is it that we are unable to uproot those networks? So there are gaps in our counter-terrorism intelligence. I mean, I know for a fact that there are intelligence-based operations continuing throughout the country, but I really, I have been working on these issues for over a decade now, Kamar. And I really don't know if two of my co-panelists know what is our counter-terrorism policy right now. I do not know that. I do not know what Pakistan's counter-terrorism policy is. We were talking, now we are fighting, but what is our strategy? I knew for a fact that whatever it's worth, Ratul Fasad was there, Zarb-e-Azb was there. What operation are we pursuing right now? And what are we trying to achieve through that operation? Or what are we trying to achieve through intelligence-based operations? My understanding is we are reacting to terrorist attacks. So we are firefighting, wherever there is a fire, we go and try to extinguish it, right? So what our terrorism policies is, once again, it takes me to whichever the new government will be. I hope we have a government in place by Feb. The new parliament should articulate our Afghan policy, our counter-terrorism policy, right? I do not know what our counter-terrorism policy is. So I think if we are attacked, We reserve the right to respond. And as Asaf said, we have exhausted all the options, right? Political, diplomatic options. If they are not listening to us and now we are getting tough, we know where these the hideouts are. So we do reserve the right, but it will be counterproductive, to be very honest. If we really go down that path, it will create more problems rather than solving the existing ones. Lastly, I think our dialogue with the US becomes important here. What we have done so far is we have heard sympathetic diplomatic voices from the US. What we haven't gotten from them is material support. How is that going to play out? Because I think whatever we do tomorrow, it shouldn't be unilateral. There are international stakeholders, there are regional stakeholders. We should have taken regional stakeholders on board before expelling the refugees. We should take them on board with whatever our next Afghan policy is going to be, whatever our next counterterrorism policy is going to be. So have policies in place. Each stakeholder should play its role accordingly, rather than being inconsistent and then react in anger, react in a knee-jerk manner. Try to understand the new, what I refer to as operational environment. Try to understand the new lay of the land, what the new lay of the land is, how strong the groups are, what are they up to. Once you have that understanding, and based on those informed understanding, you make a policy which is consensus based, I think then we will be able to tackle some portion of the problem. But it will be a journey, one step forward, two step backwards. But unfortunately, that is how it is going to be. So we'll have to muddle through. Thank you.
Thank you. One last quick question from shortly from you, Ans. Do you believe that Pakistan and Afghanistan are going to compartmentalize, for example, our challenges and issues? For example, just recently we saw that the Afghan trade minister, I think, was in Pakistan. He met with the authorities here. Still, the time when Pakistan is trying to expel illegal Afghan migrants, they're sending the trade minister. Do you think that's a very positive development?
I mean, it's not positive as such, but it is encouraging. I mean, that would be the right way, because the right way to put it, in the context that despite of this, such engagements are taking place. So it gives you that sense that the Afghan or the Taliban government would really want to separate things, aside and move it forward. Let's not forget that just yesterday, 24 hours earlier, the issue of 1,000 containers being stuck at the Karachi port was resolved, and it is being seen by the Afghan government as a consequence of the visit of the Afghan trade minister, the commerce and trade minister. And this issue had been there for what, 2 weeks, 3 weeks now. Pakistan had been alleging some smuggling and charges and custom issues on that. So in that context, the conversation will go on, and it should go on. But just to add to what Basis Saab said, I think policy paper is not a word of God. Let's just put it this way. Policies change, they are amended, they're made by humans, and they're made under circumstances, certain circumstances, owing and keeping in mind whatever the reality it is then and now. So it would differ. What is yesterday would not be today, and would not necessarily be tomorrow as well. So it needs an overhaul, and that is why the inconsistency has been there, and that will remain. I think that is number one. Number two, I think when it comes to the engagement with the Afghan side, or with the regional stakeholders vis-a-vis the expulsion of migrants or refugees, however you want to put it, or illegal aliens, as they say, I think no other country in the region, minus Iran, which of course stands isolated at an international arena on the issue, has been affected the way Pakistan has been affected. Had Pakistan taken the same road as what Iran had opted for, by making concentration camps or by limiting the movements of refugees and so on and so forth, I think the idea or the impact would have been different. But that's a different debate for a different day. With that being said, how many refugees does Uzbekistan have? How many refugees does China have? How many refugees does Tajikistan have? How many refugees does the other countries have? So you get the answer, basically, broadly speaking. most of it is affected by Pakistan. The interest of the world changed following the fall of Kabul. Their obligations drastically changed following the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. And frankly, the world does not care. They would want to give a semblance. When it comes to the US, I think it remains their moral obligation, and I would want Azaz Saab to put in that last word because he's a senior and I look up to him, frankly. The interest of the US is there because of their moral obligation and because of the China factor. If the US does not engage, the Taliban are smart enough to tell the world that, we don't care. You are not coming, we have China. And vice versa. And they always have the ISK threat up their sleeves to say, well, this is a persistent threat. So I think the China factor should not be ignored, even when talking about the engagements of the United States with the Taliban, which have been very welcoming prima facie, but they have not yielded any tangible results. Yeah, that's that. On that note, I would like to thank you. And Azaz, if you would just weigh in on the China and
Yeah,
US bit.
yeah. No, I would.
You
I
can
would.
give your concluding
This,
remarks, Azasab.
certainly, this was a factor that I think we did not mention. That the world has changed, and the attention on Afghanistan has decreased almost. It's negligible. Mainly because of Ukraine-Russia war, but also now recently because of Middle East. The US, having been frustrated with the defeat in Afghanistan, is also not interested. If they are now coming back, it may have some other interests in mind to keep some space there. Otherwise, the US is not interested in extending any further role that it want to have in Afghanistan. They are more concerned about sending some humanitarian assistance via the United Nations, where they are the biggest donors still. Europe, likewise, is also not really paying attention to Afghanistan as well. So it boils down to the region. It is the regional problem. And I agree with Basit Saab that the regional countries have to carry it through. And I also agree with Anas that ultimately no country has been affected by it more than Pakistan. And therefore, if Pakistan leverages its partners, particularly China and Iran and other neighbors, my sense is that Taliban will have to come down to talking to us as a state and as a troublemaker. They should not be. They should not have. So Pakistan should have first, of course. We should continue to plead to the US that you just cannot wash your hands off and go away. You have a moral responsibility. Therefore, you should not hold on to their money. Afghan money should be returned. They have frozen their accounts. And whatever else they need to do, they must do as part of their obligations. No progress has been made on 1267, lifting those sanctions. Until those sanctions are lifted, or even 1373, there's not much that Afghans will be able to do. So there are strong limitations on the Taliban. And if America is trying to talk to them, it would be better for them also to engage to get those restrictions lifted, because otherwise they will not be able to run as a state. My sense is that they must also deal with the neighbors as an independent, proper sovereign state. They are not behaving that way. They are just, they think that they are a group which has taken power by force, and that's the only thing that I don't think they can use the same leverage to make those irredentist claims and occupy certain parts of Pakistan and assist TTP to formulate an Imarat in the tribal belt. I don't think that is that is a reality that they will be able to. This will be a red line for, and it can take us to war. And more so, they are dependent on Pakistan. I think they should not realize, they perhaps are not figuring it enough. And a few feelers and signals like the return of refugees and holding of certain cartons, etc., containers, etc., will make them realize very soon. They will be much better, and Pakistan will also be much better off if both are talking and cooperating. there's enough money to be made by both sides on bilateral trade, and there is enough benefit to come to both sides if they engage in TAPI and CASA and extension of CPAC, etc. Many regional projects are in the offing. But first of all, the Taliban have to stop, give up that mindset that they can that they can, you know, pressurize anyone to do everything. If they can push out the Americans, then they can deal with anybody. It's not going to happen this way. Now they are a state; they are not an insurgent group. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Azaz Ahmed Chaur Saab. Thank you very much, Abdul Basit Saab. Thank you very much, Ans Malik Saab. It was really indeed pleasure to talk, and you have spoken much, and I think we have covered different perspectives. I don't need to conclude anymore. Thank you very much for sparing your time for Sanober Institute. It was great pleasure indeed.
Just a last word. So I want to wish Sanober Institute all the best. And it was great to be on the panel with Ambassador Azaz. And I hope the think tank will do really well and will show more of these interactions and written work as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.